let's talk a little bit, guys, about Michelangelo and the question you all wanted to know the entire semester. How did Michelangelo paint the Sistine Chapel? I know the question's been burning in your minds. So guys, I need all heads up. Need all heads up. Need all heads up. The question's been burning in your mind. How did Michelangelo paint the Sistine Chapel? We're looking up at this view you see on the screen here. We're looking up at the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Now, Michelangelo was approached by the warrior pope. That's his nickname. The warrior pope. And the church ran things. So if the pope said, I need you to do this, for the most part, people did it. So Michelangelo was more of a sculptor than he was a painter, but he said, okay, I'll do it. So Julius II was the pope. He said, do this. He paid Michelangelo very well. Michelangelo agreed to do it, but he didn't want to. He was more of a sculptor. He was an incredible sculptor. The guy had to have like a visual cortex in his brain that was massive, because not only could he paint and make things look three-dimensional on a flat plane, but he could also sculpt. You guys know any sculpture that Michelangelo did? You ever seen the David statue? The David statue? It's incredible. It's massive, it's tall. And interesting bit of trivia, the actual David statue is in storage. What you see if you ever go to Florence, Italy, is a copy. Interesting fact. So Michelangelo, the sculptor, he was convinced that this magnanimous task, which is several thousand square feet of work, was some sort of a conspiracy. He was a little bit paranoid about it. He thought that maybe his rival, Raphael, had planned with the Pope to let's make him do this because he's going to fail spectacularly, and I shall now be the prime artist for the papacy, for the Pope. Let me get this story. So Michelangelo, he was a little bit paranoid. He thought that somehow his rivals, Raphael, excellent painter, had conspired with the Pope to set him up, give him a project that he could never ever do. Michelangelo was in fact wrong about that. The Pope knew who he wanted to do the project, and Michelangelo, as I said, reluctantly agreed to do it. He was paid well. It took him 4 years to do all the work inside the Sistine Chapel and other locations in the Vatican, but he got it done. So the question is, how did he do it? How did Michelangelo and his many assistants, you have to have assistants to do this type of a volume of work. How did they do it? Well, the Pope wanted frescoes. He wanted fresco all over the place. So you guys know what a fresco is, what type of painting procedure a fresco is. Anybody have any ideas? A fresco, that's something we've not done in this class. This is a drawing and painting class, but we've not done a fresco, and we're not going to do a fresco because you have to mix up some lime-based covering, that you spread in a small area. And say you're painting me with my hands on my hips like this. You're painting me, so you get a reference drawing. You do a final drawing on a piece of canvas, which is called a cartoon. This final sketch drawing on canvas with watercolor, no less. It's called a cartoon. When you do the sketch, then when it's time to transfer that cartoon, and don't think anything Bugs Bunny, nothing like that. It's nothing like that. This cartoon sketch, think of it like your reference sketch, much like you did for your bird project. You take this canvas, you place it on the freshly done wall, and that plaster's lime-based. You put it on the freshly plastered wall in sections. If I did this right here, you would come up with a section like this and spread this triangle of plaster down. Then while it was still wet, this technique is called buen fresco, which means wet fresco. You had to lay your cartoon over it, and you would run a tool, almost like a pizza cutter, with little spikes on it, run it over the lines that you drew, so there's holes in this piece of canvas. And then you put charcoal, you would do what's called pouncing. You would pounce all over the lines, and so those tiny little holes would receive and allow the charcoal to go through and mark the freshly painted plastered area. Then you could remove the cartoon, and there were little dots, but it formed like a shape, and you could paint in the fresh, wet area with the plaster still wet, and it would be very effective. So that's what he had to do for every inch of what Michelangelo did. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna watch a quick film here on YouTube, and we'll see a little bit more about what I'm talking about.
Michelangelo was not happy at all with the commission that he received from the Pope. He was primarily a sculptor and not a painter, and he had hoped to sculpt an enormous tomb for the Pope. But the Pope had changed his mind, and it was not done to refuse the request of the Pope. Michelangelo was instead about to spend
the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. It was a lot of work for one man, but as you heard in the video, he hired assistants. He had them help him out a great deal. He built a very intricate series of scaffolding of platforms, so he could get way up in the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel and do that procedure I just told you about. Imagine spreading plaster on a horizontal surface above you. It's got to be wet plaster. You've got to be able to put your cartoon, which is a canvas watercolor painting, very simple, up against that, and you've got holes in the cartoon where the lines are. That you get a little bag of charcoal, and the bag is kind of made of cotton so the charcoal can come through, and you smack or pounce where all the holes are. You remove that piece of canvas, and then you've got that tracing in the wet plaster. Then you lay the egg tempera. Egg tempera is a type of paint you use. Then you paint it, and it's got to be wet. So small sections, like I say, the elbow section of me. You would paint, you would wet down the plaster, slap it on, put your cartoon with holes in it there, pounce the charcoal in, remove that canvas, and you saw the shape of my arm, how it is. Then you would paint it with the egg tempera paint. This is like what, 2 square feet at best. He did 12,000 square feet of work. Took him 4 years, and that's even with assistants. So, got an exercise for you guys. So I have something for you to draw. I have a model that you're going to draw. This model is very intricate, but you just do the basics. We're acting like we're painting our cartoon on our canvas. And then you have 2 pieces of paper. The front piece of paper will be the canvas on which you draw your cartoon. And then we're going to punch holes where you drew the lines in the canvas. Lay it over top of your second piece of paper, which represents the freshly coated surface of the Sistine Chapel. And then you will pounce. You got to share your pastels, guys. You don't have a lot, but you can share your pounce, which is pastels, and redraw on that canvas piece of paper on top, and you'll see it going through the holes you're going to punch. Remove the top paper, and you'll see little dots that you're going to draw, acting like you're painting with the egg tempera onto the wet plaster. So that's our exercise. So let me show you what your model is. I had to pay a great deal of money to get this model here today. your model is a round shape. Here's your model. Look at it, look at all the nooks and crannies, look at the chocolate chips. But your job is to draw that basic shape, which is what? It's a circle. So draw that basic shape in your canvas, the top layer. Draw that basic shape. On your top layer, you should have 2 pieces of paper. Draw that basic shape.
Just a circle.
Just a circle. Carefully made circle that looks just like your model. Anybody need to see the model again to get that shape right? Probably good. So draw that shape, and then we'll have to share the hole punch, guys. But in that basic shape, which represents what? What's that top layer represent? Anybody know? We just talked about it. What do you think, Miss Higgins? What's the top shape represent? What's the top piece of paper represent?
It represents where you're gonna punch the,
Say it again.
where you're gonna punch the holes.
Yeah, it represents the canvas on which we watercolor, and this is what Michelangelo did. We watercolor our basic drawing, and then what he did was he had like a pizza cutter with spikes in it and rolled it over all the important lines, and then he pounced it with a cotton bag full of charcoal. Pounce, 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 pounce. But you're gonna use pastel. So guys, once you get that shape drawn and you use your hole punch to punch in the basic shapes of that drawing, take pastel, which is for us is gonna represent the pounce, and draw, retrace that circle, and your holes should pick up that pastel down into the bottom layer, which represents the freshly wet plaster that you applied for this fresco technique. So go ahead and punch.
How do I use this? I never used it before.
Oh, piece of cake. And you might have to do it like that.
So I put it in here?
That'll be fine. Just like that, it's fine. Lay this over top.
Oh.
Get got your pastel?
Yes.
Okay, lay it down. So imagine you're in the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. And you had your cartoon laid on the wet plaster. And somehow it doesn't drip down, even on the ceiling. And you take your pounce, which is your pastel, and then retrace the important lines, and then remove that cartoon canvas, and there it is. There's all your important lines. All your important lines are now transferred from the watercolor canvas onto the freshly wet plastered surface of the Sistine Chapel. So guys, that's how it's done. That's how Michelangelo made about, in 4 years' time, $600,000. So back in the day, if you knew your craft, you were paid well. That's the equivalent of $600,000 for 4 years' work. Somebody do the math. How much did Michelangelo make a year with that deal?
60,000.
And he could write off paying his assistants. He could write off his supplies, because as you heard in the video, he had to foot the bill for all that, and that came out of his commission, his $600,000. So, question, what is the technique that Michelangelo used to transfer his cartoon sketch drawing on his canvas, which he painted with watercolor? How did he get that sketch from the canvas to the freshly plastered section of that 12,000 square feet of work that he had to do? How did he do that? What's that technique called? Remember, we had the pizza cutter that cut the holes in it, and then he got this bag of charcoal, and if you toss it like this, you can see the dust coming off of it.
Fresco?
Fresco, that's what, that's the whole thing. But what's that technique called where, or if you could just tell me like what the bag is called, where you, it's almost like it's what you do with it.
Pouncing?
Pouncing, exactly, pouncing. Naya, you may claim one of the 4 remaining cookies. Okay? Let me think of another question. What is the technique of fresco? What pigment? What type of pigment is used in the fresco technique? What's that? Well, that was the charcoal. But what type of pigment? Like, we got watercolor that we've used in here. We played with a little bit of acrylic. But what type of pigment? Say it again? Oil? No? Yes. Pastel? No, he didn't use that. We use that like our pounce. We use that to pounce. But he used egg tempera, which there again, you've got to mix it up like in batches. I can just imagine all the eggs. The chickens never had to go to unemployment to get a check because they were well employed with all the eggs that had to be used for all the egg tempera that had to be mixed up by Michelangelo alone to paint the Sistine Chapel. So the type of pigment was egg tempera. And that soaked in nicely to that wet plaster. And that wet plaster dried and it's permanent. It's permanent. This is the way it looks today. Now, there have been some restorations, but egg tempera into wet plaster as it dries, it's fairly permanent. Now, he did do this technique called secco, or secco, S-E-C-C-O, where he painted on the dried plaster, kind of touched it up, etc. But egg tempera. Okay, let's see. How many square feet did Michelangelo have to paint? 12,000. What was the Pope's name? I don't even take his nickname. You guys remember the Pope that I mentioned?
The warrior pope?
Say it again?
The warrior pope?
The warrior Pope is his nickname. Excellent. Excellent. The warrior Pope. Julius II. So, Ms. Eggins, if you'd like, you can get a cookie.
I'm okay.
Who was Michelangelo's main competitor? Another painter, that was his main competitor. And this person was purely an artist.
Raphael.
Raphael, yes. Miss Eggins scores again. Where is the Sistine Chapel located? In what country? Now, I could go, technically, it's the Vatican, because the Vatican is its own country inside of this country shaped like a boot. This country is shaped like a boot. Say it again? It's in Rome, tucked away in Rome. Where is Rome?
Italy.
Italy, yes. Come right up here and get yourself another cookie. Excellent work. Yeah, so the Vatican is its own country. What else can I ask? How much in today's equivalent was Michelangelo paid for his work?
600,000.
Go ahead and get yourself another cookie while you're up there. Did Michelangelo have to pay his own assistants and pay for supplies out of his own pocket? Or was there also like a supply fee in addition to the 600,000? Was that? No, not correct. He had to pay for it out of his own pocket. But I think you were getting there. You were getting there. Yeah. So back in the day, back in 1508, you had to pay for stuff out of your own pocket, out of your commission, unless it was arranged otherwise. How long did it take Michelangelo to paint the Sistine Chapel?
4 years.
4 years? Who said that? Whip around there and get yourself another cookie. Not gonna happen. Okay, who would you like to donate it to? Pick somebody. Hmm? There you go. We have a taker. Okay, guys, you have a fantastic spring break, okay? We'll see you on the other side.